It is 7 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order. Please join me for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Councilmember Mock and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. It does not look like we have anybody on for community comments, so we will move on. No presentations and reports. No public hearings. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Got a motion by Councilmember McKnight.
I'll second.
And a second by Councilmember Mock. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, on to business items. 8.1, the 2023 Street Project Award of Bid. Mr. Schmidt, welcome.
Yep, good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight, I'm bringing back bids and quotes that we've received for the 23 street projects. The first package was a complete bid package, which was for the big, the overall mill and overlay project. And then the second package that we put out for quotes was a seal coat for Monroe Drive. So we've received the bids and the quotes for those two projects now. And we got really good results, which was a good thing. So for the overall street package, which is the River Oaks neighborhood, which is a mill and overlay project, we had 6 bids for that project. The low bid coming from William Mueller and Sons in the amount of $338,277.05, and that was about 15% under my engineer's estimate. So good numbers on that. We saw really good pricing on the bituminous mix, which helped a lot, obviously, because it's a paving job. So that was the main reason for that. And then the quote package for the seal coat on Monroe Drive came in just a little under the engineer's estimate, about 8% under, and that was in the amount of $41,473, and that was from Pearson Brothers. They did our seal coat project last year too, so familiar with the city and the requirements there. So I guess all in all, like I said, good numbers. My recommendation is for council to award contract to Mueller and Sons, and then also to award the quote to Pearson Brothers for the seal coat. So I have kind of a budget summary in the memo. So again, all in, we're coming in under budget from what I was projecting. So for the core street maintenance improvements themselves, we're estimating about $400,000 for that. That's coming in about $21,000 under what our original estimates were for that project. We did have some additional items that we added on throughout the preliminary design process. So we had some sewer maintenance, which is coming out of the enterprise funds for the sewer. That was about $70,000 is what we're budgeting for that at this point. And then water maintenance, we have about $50,000, and that is for two things. Public Services had identified a handful of gate valves that need to be replaced with the project, so it would take care of those items. And then also, we have a driveway that goes up to Water Tower 2 right now. That's a gravel surface that would be paving that driveway going to the site up there. So those are the two main items for the water maintenance. So all in, estimated budget of $520,000, which maintains a full 5% construction contingency going into construction. So the projects that happened this summer, the seal coat project has a completion date in August, and then for the larger street project, a substantial completion date of September 29th, which is what was in the specifications. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, there are 2 actions that would be in front of the council tonight.
Questions?
I don't have any questions.
Not for me.
No. Is there anything that we we kept out of the mill and overlay just because of the what we projected for costs that we would entertain doing now that it's 15% less.
So the one thing that the council chose to do kind of early on in the process, the original pavement management plan had 4th Street slated for this year, but that's like a $500,000 project. And we chose not to do that. It was kind of a twofold thing. Number one, we had identified some constructability benefits for waiting until next year to do that in conjunction with the other streets that are on the north side of 4th Street. So just from a constructability perspective, and then just with the way that the budget projections were coming in with the state aid funds, we decided versus going in the hole with our state aid account, we'd wait until next year so we could maintain a positive fund balance.
Okay.
So in any respect, we still would have been negative for state aid this year, but it would have been a little better. But I don't think we intentionally left anything out of the scope of the mill and overlay. We're still doing the pedestrian ramps that we had identified. I really can't think of anything that we
All right.
left out.
Thank
so.
you.
I'm sorry if this is a silly question. You kind of went over it when you went through the budget, but you're talking about sewer maintenance and water maintenance projects. Are those like the blow-off valves that we talked about?
No, so
Earlier
those
in
are
the year?
just, they're items that are within the project area that we're not going to use street maintenance funds to
Okay.
pay for.
Okay.
So we'll use the enterprise funds to pay for the sewer casting replacements and stuff that are within the project limits,
Okay.
and the gate valve replacements that are within the project limits. We just won't use street maintenance funds to pay for them. So
Okay. Got it. That's what was tripping me up. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And also, I love it when you're wrong in estimating these things. So it is not a bad thing in my mind to come in under your estimate. So I think that's great, and I was very pleased to see these numbers.
thank you.
With that, if there aren't any more questions, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to award a contract to W.M. Mueller and Sons Incorporated in the amount of $338,277.05 for the 2023 street improvements project.
Got a motion by Councilmember Mock
I'll second.
and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
I can go again. Motion to accept the quote from Pearson Brothers Incorporated in the amount of $41,473 for the 2023 seal coat project.
Got a motion by Councilmember Mock
I'll second.
and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We have one thing left over from the work session agenda, so we will go to item number 4 from the work session agenda, the peddlers, solicitors, and food truck regulations discussion. Mr. Anderson, Ms. Sons-Eiden, I don't know who wants to take this over first.
I can start, and then I'll let Vicki chime in because she is currently overseeing all the permitting for peddlers, solicitors, and transient merchants. So she'll definitely have, I think, some very helpful feedback too. But we did, Mayor and Council put together a draft ordinance regulating peddlers, solicitors, transient merchants, and then a separate section that incorporates some new provisions regulating mobile food units, or also more commonly known as food trucks. And similar to the discussion that we had at the work session with the large event ordinance, staff is looking for council's thoughts, feedback, questions, concerns, any sorts of issues or ideas you may have as it relates to regulating these different businesses. One thing that I think is worth emphasizing that was in my cover report, or my staff report, is that the city does currently have an article in its city code regulating the peddlers, solicitors, and transient merchants, and we have historically been using that to also regulate food trucks. Those food trucks are coming in and getting transient merchant permits in order to operate in Carver, but they are inherently different from other types of businesses, and it makes more sense if we were going to regulate them to create a separate section of the code that incorporates some, very food truck specific like provisions, and that was the reason staff came up with that second section of the draft ordinance that is more focused just on the mobile food units. We have in talking about the current provisions in the city code, it's pretty bare bones, and we didn't go too above and beyond what we currently have. The point really is to get these businesses and folks that are going door to door and interacting with people and potentially coming into contact with young children if they're home and other vulnerable potentially individuals. We want a method to conduct background checks and make sure that those folks are reputable and don't have criminal histories and that kind of thing, because obviously that can be an issue. It's really meant to also legitimize the process and make sure that these businesses are on the up and up, if you will. I mean, we don't want people going door to door and trying to peddle merchandise to our community members if they are not a legitimate business and they're not doing it for good reason. So I will say that even if the council doesn't have an appetite for as much of the changes that we want to incorporate into the first section here, which is really rewriting the peddler and solicitor and transient merchant ordinance, there are a couple minor changes we should make to the existing ordinance to actually give it teeth so it can be enforced. One significant issue with it is that we have a permitting process outlined in there, but there's actually no language saying you have to have a permit. So I think we would be very hard pressed to tell somebody they have to get a permit if they pushed back and said, well, where does your code say that I have to have a permit? Because it doesn't say that. But again, it's an old ordinance. It was written, almost 25 or 30 years ago. So I don't know why that was, but the bottom line is I think that it could use some improvement, whether we make significant or substantial improvements or not. So I'm happy to field questions. I don't know if Vicki has anything to add about the ordinance itself or about her experience in administering the permitting program as it exists today, but I don't want to.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I would just add that I like a lot of the wording that is in this proposed ordinance because it gives us clear direction in how we process these. As Dave mentioned right now, if you look at our current ordinance, pretty vague, and he mentioned it'll be really hard pressed to say you really need to get a permit in these situations. The other thing that I like about the second half of this has to do with the mobile food unit. Right now, we are processing those under the old ordinance, and it's really like not applicable, but it's the only thing that we really have. So I like the way that it differentiates the two, and I also like a lot of the wording and requirements that are in here. It makes it a lot more straightforward. It helps us to be honest. Honestly, it helps us to process those, and when somebody comes in and says, what do I need to do to be a solicitor? Or what do I need to do to bring my mobile food unit? What do I need to do? And it's very, very clear. We have more details than what we can provide to them. It'll make it just easier for us to manage it. So,
All right. I know I certainly have feedback. I imagine we all do. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go first, Eric? I feel like
I don't have much, just
Okay.
related to the mobile food units. Do we have any kind of ordinance that applies here for sound, for nuisance of generators running at a certain decibel level?
As it's written right now,
Yes.
there is nothing in there as it's currently written about noises. I think if the council is curious or wants to incorporate some language like that, we can make that happen. I don't want to necessarily think through on the spot what that might look like, but I think
Maybe we use the word unreasonable.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there are clearly with food trucks. I mean, they run generators.
They do.
I think in order to operate, many times they have to have equipment like that makes noise.
And that's not the issue. I think, though, that sometimes you can have a level of noise that's beyond normal for one of those vehicles. I just know this from a grad party, a food truck in a neighborhood was running something that was unusually noisy. It was a makeshift operation for their generators. It didn't have a muffler, didn't have anything for sound suppression, and people were concerned about that. I don't know how important that is, but that we have some mechanism to regulate, well, maybe regulate's the wrong word, but something that would allow us to control unreasonable noise or move the food truck away from a residential area if it's going to have a buzzing generator all day that's going to disrupt a resident. That's
Sure.
my only thought related to this.
All right, thank you. Want to go next, Trey?
Where do ice cream trucks fall in this ordinance?
They would be considered a transient merchant, I believe, although there's been a handful of versions of this ordinance that we've kicked back and forth, and so I don't believe there's any sort of exemption for.
Yeah,
I can't ring the bell.
Well, I was reading section 10-242 under the first part, and that
Page again?
page 4. So that first A, loud noises and speaking devices. The first thing I thought about was the ice cream truck that comes through my neighborhood incessantly during the summer.
Well, and that is not the, so that's the transient merchant side of the ordinance. Section 2, I think ice cream trucks would fall under the mobile food unit.
Would they fall under mobile food? Okay.
Yeah, and
So I guess what I was reading, the location section of that ordinance, I didn't find it in there. Because it really thinks about, it can operate in a parking lot, it can operate in a residential zoning district, can be in the public right of way if parked. I just didn't see that it could be mobile.
well, all of these food units are mobile.
I know,
The
but-
difference with the ice cream trucks is that they are a little bit, just by the way they operate, they happen to move more than other
Yes,
ones.
they move
I mean,
more.
one food truck might stop in the same spot
Okay.
for the whole lunch
Okay.
period, for example, but I do think it would fit in that category. We did have some language about mobile food units, about, drawing attention to yourself with noises and sounds,
Yeah.
that we had taken out. And I don't know, Brent, if you had a specific, I think that was one thing that we had talked about just in the last week or two. Because that might have been your request. I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't remember why that was, but it was under the food unit where we removed the prohibition on kind of drawing attention to yourself with noises.
Right, the thought behind that was if trying to, in general terms, trying to regulate the things that we know that we can enforce. So if, let's say there's a food truck out in front of City Hall and someone is saying, get your cheese curds here, and someone finds that to be obnoxious, who are we going to send down to regulate that, and how are we going to measure that? And so in giving feedback to Vicki and Dave throughout this, I was kind of persistent with, do we have things in here that we can easily enforce either through the sheriff's office, or kind of look at something and say that's out of compliance or that is in compliance. So getting at the, the noise thing, I think that's something we can look at, but I also think of, grad party, food truck, we are, staff or the sheriff's office is in a position then to say the muffler's too loud, which might make that neighbor happy, but then the parents that reserve that food truck for that grad party and that's their only food, then are we putting that definition of reasonable on them? So I would probably push, Dave and Vicki and the team looking at it to say, let's come up with a decibel level that's unreasonable so that we can say that you need to get it to 50 and it's at 75, rather than saying it's too loud, because it puts us in a position not to be right where we don't have a fact pattern. It's just whoever shows up to enforce the ordinance that day.
We put a decimal level, though, it's going to apply to the ice cream truck.
Do you have a really loud ice cream truck? Okay,
So
because
this
I have some comments coming up too about sound, so.
This was my only
Yeah.
comment, where does it fall? And you know, kind of the noise thing. I was wondering if we included that. You know, I do really like that, I guess, so if we do permit an ice cream truck in the city of Carver and I want to be like, it's too loud or whatever, I mean, I can complain to the city. Is that considered as we re-permit year after year, I assume?
Well, it'd have to be a violation. It depends
something,
on.
okay.
I mean, we've had, I can think of more than a handful of situations where like noise is somewhat subjective, and so defining that.
Yeah,
so
defining it would be.
examples have been when I first got to Carver, forgot the name of the Sammy's Hideout. There was kind of issues with how loud their bands were, but the city didn't have anything related to decibels, and we were trying to kind of figure that out. There's also been complaints regarding music that the Black Sox play, you know, and some neighbors are fine with it, and some neighbors think it's too loud. And again, there's, you know, because we own the field, we can go to the Black Sox and say, can you do us a favor and turn it down? But again, like having that clearly defined by decibel level or restricting it to certain locations that in this zoning district, you're not allowed to do anything, but in this zoning district, you can. The more definition and clarity that you can provide to staff, the more successful we're going to be in delivering an equitable process to folks.
Okay. I guess I just request we research and figure out something around sound levels to define it.
And I'll refine my comment to say maybe an out-of-maintenance condition, because that's what that was. That was an exhaust shield that was loose and made 3 times the noise of the generator, which isn't so much a problem at a one-time grad party, but if we have a truck that is in town on a daily basis in an out-of-maintenance condition, yes, that's a problem, and a dB level seems appropriate.
Yeah. That's all I got.
Christy? Okay, I have a few things, and since we're right on noise, I'll talk about noise. So, living in the downtown, the food truck we have, you know, besides being up at Fleet Farm, is often down here. And so, and I don't want to pick on them because this is my favorite food truck to eat at, but
Maybe we should keep names out of
I'm
this.
not, no, I'm not saying any names. But they are excessively loud. So they, at one point, were parked in front of the gazebo park on Broadway. My house is obviously behind it. Now, this could be anyone's house. It just happened to be mine. I actually measured how far their generator was away. It was 75 feet away from my house. And you can hear my voice on here. It's kind of loud because I was so
You have a
loud.
recording?
I recorded it because it was that loud. And now it doesn't want to work.
Wow.
This is 75 feet away from my house. And you'll hear me talk.
Even in the yard.
So, then there was another morning where they were parked directly in front of my house. So now that noise was like 25 feet away from my bedroom at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So now maybe that doesn't seem loud right now, but I can turn it up for you if you'd like till it's at full decibels. But the thing is that we have to remember that there are also residences downtown, and I say that broadly, that there are a lot of residents. If you were standing in my yard that night, you could barely hear the people talking. The one time that they were in front of my house, I literally, if somebody walked by on the sidewalk and like we tried to say hello, and we were yelling and we could barely hear each other. So there has to be some kind of muffling device that is required on here, because if it's not in front of my house, if it's in front of somebody else's house, they're not going to like that either, because it is incredibly loud. And then along with that, I know that we have construction time limits for when construction vehicles can work in town and have their backup alarms beeping. So I wanted to, and I couldn't find it. I did a quick search in the ordinance and I couldn't find it. I don't know what time they're allowed to operate on Saturdays and Sundays. Most food trucks, unless there's some kind of a nice night event going on, I mean, we, at least in the recent past, we've seen them down here like a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. I think that if we have where we don't allow backup alarms going at a certain time, that we should maybe make sure that our food truck generators aren't blaring down the road any earlier than we would allow a construction truck to back up. So I know here in the ordinance, it says something about it's 8 to 10 PM if I'm,
Yeah, to conduct sales.
Right.
Yep, you're right.
to conduct sales. But here's the thing, to conduct sales, they have to get ready. So when the generator's going off at 7:30 on a Sunday morning, 25 feet from my bedroom window, it's a lot. And as much as I'm gonna go down and patronize them, it's still a lot, and I would like to see that somehow buttoned up, that we get the timing where the generator can't be on until this time. So if that means you need a half an hour of setup, then you don't open till 8:30 or whatever it is.
Is the concern, just so we can make sure to incorporate some language here, I think that we're looking for, is the concern when it's near residential properties? Or is it overall, we don't want equipment and or generators making that much noise no matter where you're located?
For me, it's overall, because that initial one here that is on my phone was across Gazebo Park. You know, it wasn't sitting directly in front of my house or anyone's house. Now, there are apartments that are right across the street. I can't say for them what they were hearing either.
Well-
But the generator was behind it, so I was imagining that the whatever residence next to it was gonna get the brunt of the noise.
Well, I was thinking we could say, you know, your equipment cannot exceed X amount of decibels when heard from a residential property. So even if they're 75 feet away, for example, if it's that loud on your property, we would have language to do it. And maybe that's not something the council, I mean, we can talk about just decibel levels too. But we'd also want to talk to law enforcement about measuring those, because not all deputies have
Decibel readers?
decibel readers with them. So.
I think there's a opportunity to find some type of hybrid, because understanding the concern of Councilmember Mock, if we can somehow balance that with, you know, the majority of food truck permits that we receive are for the parking lot at Mills Fleet Farm, and they're likely going to want a food truck that mimics their hours and they're open earlier. And so in that case, you don't have a residential area, so maybe you can create decibel levels that are within X amount of a residence or whatever. I think there's an opportunity to get at what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think there's more information. We're not gonna figure out what
Right.
that number is tonight.
Right.
But I do,
The concern is heard.
yeah.
No pun intended.
I just have a couple other ones then. So let me just to where they're at here. 10. Okay, so under locations, I have yep. So it's going to be 1034. So go to page 8 about midways, and it's letter E. So this one says a mobile food unit may not operate within 50 feet of a brick and mortar operational restaurant in the city unless it's owned by that restaurant. I'm just curious about where that comes from and why we're regulating them not to be right next to a restaurant. I mean, down here, we're kind of getting packed in too. So if they used to be down at the, you know, a food truck used to be down at the end of here quite a bit. That's getting, I mean, it's not 50 feet from the Getaway Cafe, but it's getting closer. Did I just understand the reason behind that?
Yeah.
It's to sort of protect our local restaurants, and we wouldn't necessarily want a food truck that will compete with them to be right outside, and so someone might go park and want to walk into, I don't know, Mizzy's, since that's going to be opening soon, and maybe a food truck sets up right outside and kind of steals business for them. It really is a policy thing, and 50 feet, some cities use that, other cities don't have this. You don't have to have it. You could make it bigger, but the intent there really was to, you know, I know that there is a food truck that operates often in Carver that sells coffee. I forget what it's called, but yeah, and I think it would not be the greatest for business if they went and set it up right outside of our new coffee shop down the street here. So that was the intent there, but again, that is open to the council's policy objectives.
Do we think 50 feet, I mean, 50 feet is like half the length of Gazebo Park, like half the width of Gazebo Park. Do we think that's even far enough if we want to look at it from that standpoint?
Yeah, we intentionally put it low, thinking that the council might want to increase it, but we don't want to start too high and have you say put it down. But just piggybacking off of Dave's comments, the rationale traditionally has been in other cities is that the brick and mortar establishments are paying property taxes towards the services the city provides, and if, i.e., XYZ coffee shop opens up right next to the Getaway Motor Cafe, then you're in a way hurting that business that's invested full-time into the community. So you could make it 100, you could make it whatever you think is reasonable. There is exceptions that Dave drew up where, think of like a brewery or a coffee shop, they might have like somebody come in and do an event with them because they don't provide that type of food. And so that's where that consent portion comes in. But if you wanted to increase it, that was a totally flexible number. We were hoping to inspire some conversation from the council on that number, so.
And it's a double-edged sword too, right? Because like if we think about downtown area, the further we push it away from restaurants, the further into the residential area we're pushing it. So,
I mean, we can stick with 50. I saw that in there. I just needed to kind of understand a little bit better what my thoughts were. If everyone else is good with 50, we don't have to go any further.
I mean, one of the things that from a kind of internal policy is going to change is because of the parking lot striping that we're doing at Broadway and Main, we're not going to be permitting mobile food units to operate down at the end of Broadway just because there's not going to be a space for them to do so. So in the downtown, you'd be looking at either sections of Old 40, gazebo.
Third Street, gazebo. Trust me, that didn't escape me with the new parking down there. That was already.
Yeah.
So and if we're good with 50, that's fine. But I just wanted to.
I think it could become restrictive if it went over that with the space we have.
I'm good. Okay, and then I'm good on that one. At the top of page 5, number 2, talks about entering upon any residential premises for the purpose of carrying on permittee's trade or business. Now, is this the food? Does this have food truck involved in it, or is this?
No, this is the peddler, solicitor, transient merchant one.
Okay, so that's somebody knocking on your door. This isn't having like
correct.
a food truck in your
yeah.
yard. Okay.
Yeah, I think the point there was to just tell these door-to-door salespersons that we don't want them knocking on doors after 8 o'clock or before 9 a.m.
Okay. I'm gonna skip around a bit here. So 3. Let's see. B. Okay, that one's good. Sorry, we knocked some of these off here already. So, okay, and then I have one more. Are you checking your watch, Eric?
Silence.
yeah, TikTok, Christy.
And I'm looking over your shoulder because my battery died.
Oh, they're not really closer. Let's see here.
Do you want me to start on my list while you're going through?
Yeah, because I thought this one was gonna come to me quickly,
I
but
can
it
go.
didn't. So
Okay,
go ahead.
I can go quick.
Yeah.
Or not quick. I've got a bunch of stuff.
Oh, then stop. I'm back. No. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, I am on page 3 of the ordinance exemptions. My question is, can we have exemptions for peddlers at the farmer's market? And I could be using the term peddlers wrong, even though you have the definition in the ordinance.
Is that a number you're
Yes,
looking at,
I
or
think
is it just-
Exemptions.
Yeah.
I think we're already
Just right
there
here.
with
Okay.
number 1, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's anyone selling products grown or produced or cultivated or raised on any farm, and maybe that doesn't. That's it from the Constitution, from Minnesota's Constitution. We can't license those individuals.
You see crafty folks there too, is what I'm thinking. Is like
Let me think about that. So is your thought the fact that they're considered transient merchants? I mean, they're not going door to door, obviously.
Yeah,
People are
I
coming
just-
to them.
I just think.
And
So
we
I'm
have
not-
Steamboat Days has marketplace too. Is that what you're kind of getting at? Is
Yeah,
having
I
those?
just don't want. I don't think that those folks, they're already paying to be part of the farmers market. I don't think. And maybe you're right. If they're not going door to door, it doesn't.
I can
apply.
confirm that this framework doesn't apply to farmers markets. I don't think it does, and I'd
Okay.
want to look back at the definitions just to make sure it all looks okay, but the intent was not to include farmers market activities in
Perfect.
here because that's sort of a different thing.
Okay.
But I'll confirm that, and if it doesn't address it, unless the council collectively has issues with this, I'll make sure it's exempt.
Okay.
Because
That's
I
my
agree.
desire, is that the folks in the farmers market would be exempt.
As an event like that, then would that also include something like Steamboat Days for our marketplace? Because it's already encompassed in the event, the same as the farmers market would be.
I'll check. It's kind of the same thought. I mean, there's organized events where you're having people put up stands and sell things. Are you talking? So as someone who I have not had the privilege of frequenting Steamboat Days. So is it
no.
is it kind of the same? I mean, are they selling crafts? Are they selling?
It's goods and wares, and they pay a fee to have a 10x10 booth space, same as they would do at the farmer's market, whatever
Less
that fee is.
farm stuff you
Yeah,
can eat.
this is more like I said, goods and wares.
Okay.
And they set up on the street within the boundaries of Steamboat Days.
Okay.
So kind of the same.
All right. I'll look into that and confirm that those are categories of businesses that we don't necessarily need getting permits from city staff. Yeah.
Also, under exemptions, I would like to see an exemption for peddlers or solicitors who are 18 and under. And I'm thinking Girl Scouts, the kids who are selling car wash stuff. Well, all of our neighbors' kids who.
I asked Brent about this, and I thought they're excluded because it's
They're a nonprofit.
Nonprofit.
Yeah, so they're already going to be exempt, but it's kind of
The boys' soccer team is a nonprofit?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Is it stated in here?
Yeah, it is.
anyone
I missed it.
anyone selling
It's-
things for and furtherance of a nonprofit that's approved
Yeah,
by
there
the
was
state or
somebody
federal
there.
government.
Oh, okay.
And admittedly, I'm going to clean up some of that exemption language because it doesn't read well to me. After reading it and rereading it, I want to make it a little bit easier to read and understand because I don't like it. So, but yes, nonprofits will be exempt.
Okay.
And that includes Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, kids selling candy bars for their hockey team, that kind of thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
And then my last question for the exemptions section for under A, sub number 1, where it talks about anything that's raised on a farm. Can we make sure that weed isn't part of that exemption? Or is there a way?
Sorry, Courtney.
I knew.
Potentially, yes. I'll want to think about that a little bit too, because there are, believe it or not, protections under federal law for hemp and THC that's derived from hemp, and that's kind of where this whole backdoor legalization came in with last year's legislation. That first exemption, I mentioned it before, but that's directly from the Minnesota Constitution that talks about farm-raised produce and things that we can't license as a city. So there may be some limitations on how much we can change with that exemption.
Okay.
That said, I think that we're going to get some clarity on all that very soon about licensing what you can and can't sell, and there are bills right now. Not to get too far off track here, but I think we're going to see some clarity on that really soon, and
Okay.
for the city at least. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'll volley over to you if you're ready while I look for my next one.
Yeah, most of them are done. I just wanted to reiterate that we were going to get some clarification on the timings that we were going to, like for construction and things, like for the timings for weekends that they'd be able to be in business, the mobile food trucks.
You mean if they're going to be out there early, like making food? at
Well, right now
7?
we have mobile food units may only conduct sales between 8 a.m. and 10 o'clock. That doesn't mean starting up the generator at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning because, as I was talking about before, we have construction limits on when people can use their backup, big construction trucks to have a backup alarm going on the weekends. So can we get a little more information on that to see what we can match up here?
What we're, at least if you want our focus to change, we can, but my focus was going to be with the team to talk about how that noise relates to decibels and how it relates to residential homes, and not necessarily trying to mirror it with construction in that, from recollection, there are some abbreviated hours on Sundays, and I'll use Fleet Farm as an example, is, they might want to have that food truck there all day, and I would say, I would offer that no one has a problem with a food truck at Fleet Farm operating to 5 p.m. where they would.
That's on their private property, not on a public city street.
But this still applies to that. This would apply to all those instances. So you could have to get a mobile food unit permit whether you're on private property or a public street. So trying to kind of make sure that there aren't unintended consequences, because there isn't a separate permit for one and the other.
Right. We already talked in here, though, about them being on private property, and, I mean, there's different, we've got different lettered categories here of if they're on private property, this, and,
Not for mobile food units.
Those are just the approved locations of where they
Okay.
can operate. And I think, but to your point, Councilmember Mock, I think what you're asking for us to maybe incorporate is language about when they can operate loud equipment and make it similar to when construction workers can operate.
right. Well, that was
loud
just,
equipment,
it's,
right?
to me, it's, if we thought that noise was a nuisance,
Right.
then let's just take a look at it. I don't want to limit what hours they can be up at Fleet Farm. That makes sense. If they want, I mean, if they're open at 8, be open at 8. Again, if we're starting up the generator at 7 to be open at 8, I do think that's unreasonable in a residential area on a weekend morning. So whatever that comes back looking like, if we can just look into that a little bit farther.
Yep.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you. And then that's all I have.
Yeah, and you asked my last question about the private property thing, so,
Okay.
I am good. So, anything else that bubbled up?
Nope.
All right. Do you
was
have what
lively.
you need from us on that one?
I think so, and it'll probably be the same approach as we talked about with the large event permitting, because we will want to put our heads together and come up with some fees. We have fees already for some of these businesses, but not for all of them. And we want to work in a fee for if they want to use, like, the city park, for example. We would maybe allow food trucks to operate in a park for a fee. So we'll be back to talk
Okay.
more about this.
And knowing that the process will take a number of weeks, if not months, before we have a finished product, would this be something that would be effective? I suppose it's up to us, but next year, middle of the season?
I think it can be up to you. Obviously, there aren't a lot of food trucks that operate from, October 15th through April. Well, who knows this year, but but we can talk about that. I mean, you could have it go into effect maybe a month or two later if we get something in this spring and we still want there to be some regulation before the end of the season. Or if you want to give businesses a grace period and roll this out more slowly, you could do it that way as well. I think we have a lot of options in that respect. And maybe, I guess I would ask Vicki and Brent from staff standpoint, is there any sense of urgency in trying to get something in place sooner than later?
The only framework of urgency comes into kind of council member Mock's concerns. I think we probably don't have an ordinance in place for mobile food units that we could fall back on with any type of reliability if someone pushed back. And so if we want to kind of curtail some of the behavior that we think is unproductive, I think I would offer that we try to fast track this so that we can check all the boxes for the concerns the community has.
And then for the permits that have already been issued, those folks would be grandfathered in for this season?
Well,
they'll
have permits. Well, for the food trucks, no, they would have to get a food truck permit.
I know there's one that's already received one that's been up at Fleet Farm, but
And I
They
think
wouldn't
what
have to
What we talked about doing.
prorate
is-
that through?
Well, we would
Okay.
we would effectively give them, they've already paid a fee
Mm-hmm.
for the year. And so we would effectively give them the new permit and not make them pay a new fee, but we would give it to them and give them the new regulations, because they're still gonna be falling under that umbrella of
Okay.
needing to adhere to those regulations, and we don't want that to be. So it'd be kind of a nice way for us to say, hey, here are our new regulations, and by the way, we aren't going to make you come back and do this again until you're 1 year is up, and then you'll have to come to a new permit.
Okay.
We're just gonna transfer their transient merchant permit into a food truck permit.
okay.
I think that sounds really reasonable.
If
Yes.
that works for the council.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
what-
I worry that it's a little bit changing the rules mid-season, but I think the sooner we can do that, the better. And I don't think we're changing anything drastically, but I do think that potentially that noise issue is going to be maybe a tough one with the vendors, but. All right. Let's see. Nothing else on that one?
Nope.
Okay. Communications, Mr. Mayor.
Just have one thing as a follow-up from the work session. I teed up with Aaron Schmidt the conversation that the council had related to the three-way stop at Broadway and Main, and specifically what type of informational signage would be appropriate or available to the council to consider. So Aaron, if you wouldn't mind talking about that.
Yeah, so it was my understanding, the topic of possibly adding like the three-way under the stop sign, or like traffic from the left does not stop, or traffic from the right does not stop, supplementing onto the stop signs. Is that the kind of the main question the council had? So I did a little research here during the meeting, looked at the Minnesota Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is our main governing document for implementing signage in the state of Minnesota. And what I found is this is not an all-way stop, so we can't put the phrase all way underneath it. Uniquely, I wasn't quite sure of this, but supplemental plaques with legends such as two-way, three-way, four-way, or other numbers shall not be used with stop signs. So we can't use that, but what it does say is plaques with other appropriate messages of traffic from left or right does not stop should be used at intersections where stop signs control all but one approach to the intersection, unless the only non-stop approach is from a one-way street. So to me, that means this makes sense in this situation where we have the southbound on Broadway does not stop. That is kind of confusing to me. So engineering judgment would say that there would be a good application here to use something like that. So it's not standard, it's not required, but it is an option and guidance that's laid out. So
Can you restate the one that you think is appropriate?
it would be, so traffic from left or traffic from right does not stop,
Okay.
depending on what approach you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where we'd put that plaque underneath the stop sign.
Sounds.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Just to confirm that we can't put three-way stop.
No, we can't do that, so.
But we can add the extra plaque clarifying those.
When, tomorrow, can you send me a photo of that I can send on to the council?
Yeah,
And we'll get that installed as soon as possible. then.
yep, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good.
any other questions? Okay, thanks.
That's it? Okay. Eric, you want to go first again?
I don't have any updates. There
Okay.
was no planning commission meeting.
All right. Christy?
That's the first time in a long time. There was no HPC meeting, but we will be ramping up here again, I'm sure, as spring comes. And then Brent, are we still having a speaker at the next?
Not at the next, he is available in May, so that's when he'll be coming out. Michael Coop from the State Preservation Office.
Okay. And then in case the rest of the council wants to show up, are you going to notice that then for that night? Okay. The other thing then is the Lions. We have an Easter egg hunt coming up at Community Park on April 8th. The bunny will be here, so the Easter bunny will be here that day running around, so that's at 10 o'clock on Saturday, April 8th. That's all I have otherwise.
All right. Jack?
I don't have anything. We have a Southwest Transit meeting later this week.
All right. I'm not quite ready with my updates here. Let's see. Just two quick things. We approved 2 liquor licenses tonight, which were fairly straightforward and part of our consent agenda, but I just wanted to draw attention to them. The first is for the Lions pork chop dinner, which is always great and is like a do not miss. I have a pork chop connoisseur in my home who will make sure that we never miss that one. It's on April 28th in Village Hall, right here at City Hall from 4 to 8 p.m. And then the second one is for Mizzy's Pizza, which, if you read the tea leaves, it's a 1-month liquor license that starts in June 1st. So it would be a safe assumption that that's probably when they're planning to open. So very exciting to see that. So that's all good news and 2 really exciting things that are coming up in our community. You mentioned the Lions Easter Hunt. Thank you. Let's see. Kind of going back, I always kind of take a look at what has been going on in my role in the last 2 weeks since we last met. Day after our last meeting, I headed to St. Paul for a press conference on the State Competitiveness Fund. And what that is it's an investment of $115 million in state funds that can be used to provide help for businesses, but also small cities like ours to get grants as we all know, the grant process is really hard, not only just writing the grant, but then also the reporting process that's involved with that. So we could potentially have some help writing the grants and reporting on the grants, and specifically looking at grants for renewable energy sources. So things like the solar panels on top of any future building projects, so stuff like that. Participated in the BizTown interviews, which I've done before. It's always fun. These were at La Academia, and it is fifth graders who are really interviewing for roles that they will play in BizTown when they go to that field trip later on. Let's see, last Friday we had a Business Alliance meeting, which was really well attended. We had a debut appearance from our friends at Hometown Bank, which was exciting. And then Deputy Chafin was there as well to help answer some questions from folks. Speaking of new businesses, very exciting, but we got a permit application for a veterinarian office, which we have all known about that because we got it in the email, but it's going to go in Carver Square in the chiropractor's office, so Healing Hands Veterinary Clinic, and really excited to see them come to Carver. The last, you know what, I should give a quick levy update. We had we had day at the Capitol, which was really good, and I was able to meet with 4 legislators, our current state senator, Glenn Grunhagen, and Representative Bobby Harder, and then our previous ones, who we had last year at this time before we got redistricted, Senator Coleman and Representative Nash. Just a quick update in kind of the last 2 weeks for the bonding bill. It was passed by the House, which I think was an update that I shared at our last meeting, and we were in the bonding bill for $6 million. They need to have a supermajority to pass it in the Senate, and they didn't get the votes. So, just really, really plainly put, they're kind of playing the political games so that they can get the pull for other items that are on their agendas. I do still think that we will see a passage of a bonding bill. Hopefully Carver will continue to be in there, but again, this could be something that goes a lot later on in the session. So it could be one of those last minute things that we're still talking about in May. So the only other thing that I had is, as a couple of our legislative priorities this year are local control and then also cannabinoid legislation, and kind of making sure that there are some rules put around that. Representative Nash reached out to me and was looking to have support on local regulation and the ability to have cities be able to opt out of the cannabinoid legislation that they're working on through St. Paul. I know that this has been a very mixed group and mixed, not evenly, but I just wanted to check in and see if that would be something that we would be interested in signing on to support. It certainly is something that has my support, but I know that in previous discussions on this topic, I've been kind of an island out there.
So to make sure I understand, so is that like being a dry city?
Correct.
Related
Yes,
to that?
that's
Like
exactly how he explained it to me.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I wouldn't support that.
I also would not support that.
I would support that.
Okay. So we've got a 50-50.
Well, is this an official, this is an
He
official
wants a
vote.
letter of support.
Okay.
So, but it's not something that I would be comfortable with if you guys were like, this is a team sport, right? Like, so I don't want to be like, hey, Representative Nash, here is my letter from Courtney Johnson that's representing the city, even though I'm one opinion out of 5 up here. So maybe it's something, because it's a tie vote, I don't think that me breaking the tie applies to this one. So I will maybe bring it up again in 2 weeks when Laura's back.
Is this something we can discuss further in a workshop session? Do we have?
Well, this is support for a proposal, right?
Yeah.
True.
Right?
Okay.
Exactly. So if the proposal comes to fruition, right, that there is that opportunity, then of course we'll have
And
that.
Right.
to be clear,
Yeah.
like, this isn't, this is support for the proposal. This is the support for cities to have the opportunity. This isn't necessarily drawing a line in the sand right now saying, we are gonna decide this once it's legislated. It's giving communities the opportunity to say yes or no.
I'm still in support of it.
All right, then that is it from my laundry list. So unless anybody has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A motion by Councilmember McKnight
I'll second.
and a second by Councilmember Pershman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Good evening.